Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome back to the shop. In this episode, we will do some major surgery and remove the fuse box so there's no turning back. We're taking the fuse box off the main wiring harness, and we're going to be running new wire that will connect up in a future episode to the RTMR. So what I'm going to show you is the surgery I did on the wiring harness, some of the decisions I made. I'll also share with you what the wire routing is, which relays are going to be used, and how it's all going to line up. I'll also show you which of the fuses are going to be used. At this point, I'm only going to use 4 out of the 5 relays on the RTMR, so I'll leave one for future use, and I'll be using all 5 of the fused lines as well. So hope you enjoy this. I'm pretty excited about the progress that was made. I was getting a little worried there in the middle of this, but it all came together with a little bit of head scratching and thinking. So the main wire harness has been reinstalled back into the car. It's again not been wired up yet, but at least you can see where we are in the progress. This is the main harness. I've laid it out on the bench and cleaned it up, labeled all of the connections and where the switches are, and I think I'm going to be able to reuse this entire harness and only make modifications to it, so I'm pretty excited about that. Next thing I want to show you is my intent and how I'm going to modify this, and I'll give you a couple close-ups of the areas and I'm going to make the modifications. These are 3 of the connectors on this harness. These connectors interface with the switches that are mounted on the steering column. This connector is for the directionals and the high beam and the horn. This one is for the ignition, and this one is for the wiper. The other main connection points for switches also on this harness include the hazard switch. And if you go down the other end here, you'll see that there's also 3 sources or 3 wires for the headlamp switch. So these 5 connections are what are going to be used as inputs into the RTMR fuse relay box. All of these connections are powered through the fuse box that used to mount onto the bulkhead. This main power comes in and goes directly into the fuse box on this end here. So there it is. And that powers or provides power to the entire fuse box. What I'm going to do is take all of these wires and I'm going to reroute these in as being the power source from the RTMR. So spend a little bit more time on the brown wiring. The brown is where all of the power comes from the car. It is connected directly or indirectly to the battery. There are 2 main wires coming from the battery or the starter solenoid connection. One goes directly to the fuse box, the other goes from the starter solenoid, which is connected to the battery, directly to the alternator. So the alternator going back to the starter solenoid and then into the battery is the circuit to charge the battery. Now these other 4 wires coming out of the power wire, not the alternator to battery wire. There are 4, 2 of them the same gauge here. One goes to the light switch, the other goes to the ignition switch. This one goes to the fuse box. That's again the main power for the fuse box. And this one is kind of a leftover appendage. This is the only connection that this wire has, and it goes back to the alternator. So indirectly, it has a connection to the overall power, the lights, the ignition, and the alternator, but it serves no other purpose, and it's a leftover from what I've read. This wire can actually be removed. It's actually dangerous because it's not fused. It will fail before all the other heavier gauge wires, so this will melt before all the other gauge wires. So this wire ought to be just removed and capped, or completely taken off or disabled out of the wiring harness altogether. Okay, before I cut any wires, the first thing I need to do is to remove the fuse box from the wiring harness. So I'm going to do that offline, and then I'll show you how I did it. Okay, this was actually the easy part. All I had to do was take some tin snips and cut right through it. So just be careful if you do this. Be careful not to cut any of the wiring. So I pushed everything over to one side and just snipped it. Okay, the removal of the fuse box, I thought there would be a nice easy way of pushing these pins out. Tried it for about 5 minutes and said, the heck with it. So I'm going to have to cut and strip these anyway, so I just snipped them all. So the wiring harness is now free of the old fuse box. Okay, the purple wires from the fuse box, the large wire, the higher gauge wire, goes to the high beam switch. The other three, one of them goes to the boot lamp and the ignition key lamp and the passenger lamp. So one lights lamps. One is for the hazard switch, which provides fused power, unswitched, so it's always hot, fused power to the hazard switch. And the third one provides fused, always hot power to the cigar lighter. I'll probably convert that into some sort of USB port. The four wires, the four white wires that came out of the fuse box, there are two different diameters or two different gauges. The thicker wire goes directly to the ignition switch. The other three, one is for the oil pressure lamp, one is for the ignition lamp, and the third one goes to the PWA lamp. So I'll have to work out which each of these three are. This is definitely the one that goes to the switch. The way the Eaton Bussman RTMR is set up, it's the 85 and 86 coil terminals will be reversed. So we'll be having where 85 is normally going to ground, that terminal will be a positive, and that will actually run the switch. And the power from the battery will go to, as normal, to terminal 30. Terminal 86, which is usually used for the switch, will be grounded directly to the bus terminal on the RTMR, and the accessory will go to, terminal 87 will go to whatever the accessory is, and the accessory needs to be grounded. If we look at the front of the RTMR, you'll see that we'll have the relays are going to be attached and fused to fuse 1. So relay 1 goes to fuse 1, relay 2 goes to fuse 3, relay 3 goes to fuse 5, relay 4 goes to fuse 7, and relay 5 goes to fuse 9. If I flip this over, we can see we've already got the
30 pin wired with brown, because brown is power on a Triumph or the Lucas wiring diagram, and the bus terminals are here. So this one will be power, the power bus, and that is connected to the left hand side, looking at the underside, and this terminal here is the ground bus, so that will go up to the 86 terminal. So these are the red wires. I'll start with these first, and these will all go into the relay. The red wire with the green stripe comes from the headlight switch. So these are for the running lights. This is power coming in from the switch, so this will go to the 85 terminal, and these red wires will come out of the 87 terminal and go directly to the accessory. Now, in order to make this up, I'm going to have to add a little bit of wiring here so that it will connect directly into the RTMR. So I'll add some wiring in here. They're going to be red on both sides, but I'll be able to keep them straight when I put them into the RTMR. So I'll keep the color coding as you go along. So this will be one of the 5 relays. The next set of wires are the purple wires, and in the original configuration these were on the other side of the fuse. So this is the fused always hot wires, and these connected to the brown always hot unfused wiring through the fuse in the fuse box. These are the white wires for the ignition switch. These are in the original design, they were powered directly by the brown wires through the ignition when the ignition was turned on or keyed on. So they are unfused in the original design, and they'll remain unfused. These white wires then powered the green wires through the fuse. So the green wire, which runs inside the car, are fused, keyed, fused on, or keyed on and fused. So what I'll end up doing is ganging the white wires together, and then I will use this as a switch for the relays for the green. So the green will only turn on when the ignition is switched on, and this will run the signal lights, the tach, the temperature gauge, the fuel gauge, and the hazard switches. So that will be how that is set up. So I'm going to try my hand at soldering these connections together instead of using a crimped butt weld or a butt joint. What I'm going to do is, or what I have done is spread the wires so that they'll become a little bit more entwined before doing any twisting. I get better connection that way. And then I'll solder them together. So this is the first test fit of the harness. I've gotten 2 of the circuits wired in. Just want to make sure I've got enough wire, or basically cut it down to the right wire length. It's installed temporarily. I've test fitted where the wires are running, and definitely I want to use the old heater hose holes in the dashboard here to run the wiring. So I've got it coming through that hole, and as you can see, I have more than enough wiring to deal with this connection. I've also hooked up the power from the starter solenoid, so I've got enough room there. and I think I've got enough of a distance for the bend. Now I just need to also hook up a ground source. So I'm going to snip the wires at this point. This is the connector for the directionals, the high beam, and the horn. To hook the horn up to the relay, this is a little bit unusual. This purple and black wire comes off of the switch. So in order to get this hooked up to the relay, we're going to have to snip this wire. One will go to power, and the other will go, the one going to the down the harness to the horn will go to the power side, which will be terminal 87 on the, if you can't see it there, terminal 87 on the relay, and the switch side, which will be this part, will go into terminal 85 on the relay. So what I'm going to do is snip in here and then run two separate wires coming down the harness. I've actually split the harness open. I've untaped it and unwrapped it. So I'll snip it here, put wire in two different connections, and then run it down so that it runs along the lines of all of the other connections that are going to the RTMR. Okay, so now I've got the cable or the line run for the horn. It was snipped, and I snipped from the connection, and I ran both of them in the same direction and wrapped them underneath tape. So I've now got two purple wires. I've marked both ends of the wire so I know which one goes into terminal 85 and which one goes into terminal 87. So there's the horn power and the, whoop, where am I? There's the horn switch. So horn power and horn switch. Okay, now to the four purple wires that I have here. Thought about it a little bit more, looked at the wiring diagram a little bit more. I thought this purple wire would be one of the relay wires, but the relay, when I was thinking this is the relay for the high beam, and the high beam switch is actually inside of the steering column switch, so I'm going to be using this connector. The purple wire powers more than just the headlight. It powers a couple of other circuits. So this is actually going to be a fused circuit, and then what I have to do is the high beam switch is actually the blue and white wire. So what I'm going to end up doing is snipping the blue and white wire, and one will be power and the other will be the switch side. So one will go to the 85 circuit and the other will go to the 87. So I'll snip the wire. One is going to go powering the switch, and the other is going to be the signal from the switch, which is powered through the purple wire, and then the other is going to be going to the high beams. So I'm gonna think about that a little bit more and how to execute that, and I'll show you how I've done it once I've thought it through. And then the other side is I've got two brown wires left. I yanked or pulled the one 18 gauge wire off of that comes off of the alternator. That was a redundant circuit, so to simplify the wiring I've removed that. But both of these will they used to be unfused, going directly to the ignition and directly to the headlamp, and I will fuse both of these leads so that when they're running inside the cabin there's less of a safety issue. Okay, so now we've got the high beam power and switch wired in. This will go to relay number 1. So I think I've got the outline or the layout of how I'm going to do this. So what I ended up doing, as I said earlier, I took the blue and white wire from this connection and split it high up here so that I'd have a straight run going up, and then I was able to take this wire and curve it in this direction and then put the connection in this area here. So I've got it all connected and initially wrapped. The way the harness will go, I have to unwrap a little bit of, I have to unwrap a little bit of this harness to put the blue wires in, but I've got them all marked and I know where this one's going. So that's the new harness for the RTMR. All of the wires that will be going into that. Okay, I've got the cabling all run back inside of the, or behind the dashboard. I've got everything wrapped on the inside. So it looks like everything fits. All of the connections are made. I tried to run everything in a similar way so that it would fit. I've got the wiper hooked up so that that will run. Actually, that's going to be another episode. I'm going to put a couple of different 5-pin relays on this one so that the power is not going through the switch, the wiper switch. So that's a future episode. Here is the wiring. I haven't wrapped it yet. It still needs to. I need to get the right length. I've got the rough length so far. The RTMR is going to go right here, and I'll run both the relay wiring as well as the fused wiring. This is all in the same bundle here, so that'll go. I was able to find a grommet at the hardware store that actually fits the old heater hose hole. I've got another one on the other side here that'll go for the ignition wiring and some of the PWA wiring. So it's coming along. Next, the other thing I'm going to do is run a off of the RTMR. I'm going to run a fused hot wire off, and I've decided I'm going to use a frame mounted relay for the electric fan. So I've got that fuse in the front, or that relay located in front of the radiator. So I'll wire that up. I'm going to run the purple wire coming out of this area here, or actually out of the RTMR. I'm going to run that along the frame and connect it to the wiring that's already sort of pre-existing. Another thing that needs to be done on the RTMR, I've got all the jumpers run from the hot side, the fused side, to the relay side, but I need to put a ground in here on the ground bus bar. So I've got to make a ground up. I've got the power side of the bus bar hooked up with a wire, and that's going to come right off of the starter solenoid. So I'll get all of the wiring done in a future episode, so you'll see what that'll look like.